What kind of man agrees to let his wife spend the night with another man, and then ruins her life without raising his voice? When my ex asked for one last night to say goodbye, I thought I could handle it. I thought I was in control. But my husband was already preparing his quiet, devastating revenge. When Ryan's name appeared on my phone screen after 8 years, my heart jumped before I could stop it. He was the kind of man who lived like a song, loud, emotional, unforgettable. We'd ended badly back then, but he always had this hold on me, like unfinished business I couldn't delete. He said he'd be moving abroad soon, that he just wanted to see me one last time, talk about what could have been. I told myself it was harmless. People meet their exes all the time. Besides, I was married now, stable, responsible. What could go wrong with a simple conversation? Mark, my husband, was the opposite of Ryan in every way. He was calm, precise, the kind of man who checked receipts and locked the doors twice. I used to find that comforting. Lately, it just made me restless. He never shouted, never lost control. Sometimes I wished he would. I told myself I only missed passion, not the man who used to give it. When I told Grace, my sister, about Ryan's message, she called it fate. "You need closure," she said. "If you ignore him, you'll always wonder." That word, closure, sounded so neat, so reasonable. I started using it like a shield. I even practiced how I'd tell Mark. I'd make it sound honest, mature, impossible to argue with. So, one evening over dinner, I said it. I told him Ryan had reached out, that he wanted one last night to talk before leaving forever. I watched for jealousy, anger, anything. But Mark just kept his calm expression and said, "If that's what you need." I laughed nervously, unsure if he was serious. He didn't look away. "You mean you're okay with that?" I asked. He said, "I trust you. Just make sure you tell the truth afterward." It should have felt like freedom, but something about the way he said it, so quiet, so certain, made me uneasy. Still, I told myself it was permission. I even felt proud. How many women had husbands secure enough to let them face their past? That night, I texted Ryan back, "I'll see you Friday." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The days leading up to that Friday felt strange. I told myself I was being brave, facing the ghosts of my past. Grace said it was healthy, that not everything needed to be labeled betrayal. She liked calling it emotional honesty. I liked how that sounded. It made me feel wiser, almost noble. Mark didn't bring it up again. He moved around the house as usual, calm, predictable. Sometimes I wanted to shake him, to force some kind of reaction, but he stayed steady, unreadable, like a wall I couldn't crack. On Thursday night, I told him I'd be staying at Grace's after meeting Ryan. It was a lie, but it sounded close enough to the truth. He nodded without looking up from his laptop. "Drive safe," he said. That was all. No fight, no guilt, no curiosity. Just calm. His detachment stung more than anger ever could. When Friday came, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time before leaving. I told myself it wasn't for Ryan. It was for me. I wanted to see if I could still turn heads, still have that spark I used to. I wore a dress Mark once called "too young for you." Maybe it was petty, but it made me feel alive. Ryan met me at a quiet cafe on the west side of town. He looked almost the same. Same messy hair, same tired smile that pretended to be confident. He said I hadn't changed much, and I laughed like it was true. He talked about his music, his failed relationships, the places he wanted to go. I listened, nodding, pretending not to notice the way he kept glancing at my hands, my ring. Then he said it softly, like he was testing the words. "I just want one last night, to say goodbye properly." I froze for a second, pretending to think it over. Inside, I'd already decided. I told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. Not really. People need closure, don't they? Besides, Mark had said yes, or at least hadn't said no. I wanted to see if I could still make someone want me. I wanted to prove something I couldn't even name. We left together before sunset. I remember the walk to his car, the smell of the air, how alive I felt. Every step felt like a secret I was about to own. Later that night, I sent Mark a message that said, "Staying at Grace's. See you tomorrow." He replied, "Okay, drive safe." That was it, not a single question. Ryan kept talking about how he'd always thought we were meant to end differently. I said maybe we were just unfinished people trying to fill old spaces. It sounded poetic in the moment. I wanted it to sound like something meaningful. When I finally got up to leave, he asked if I was happy. I said, "Mostly." He smiled sadly, like he already knew that wasn't true. The next morning, I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark. "Did you find what you were looking for?" I typed and deleted 3 different replies before sending, "Yes, it's done." "I feel clear now." He replied almost instantly, "Good." "So do I." For some reason, that answer made me nervous. I tried calling him, but he didn't pick up. I told myself he was busy, that he just needed time. Still, I drove home faster than I'd planned. The air felt heavy, the kind that sticks to your skin. When I pulled into the driveway, something looked off. His car was gone, but that wasn't unusual. What was strange was the front door. It looked slightly different. The new silver lock glinted in the sunlight. I tried my key, but it didn't fit. I twisted it again, harder, until it snapped in half. I stood there staring at the broken piece of metal in my hand, my stomach dropping. My first thought wasn't panic, it was disbelief. He wouldn't actually do this. Mark wasn't impulsive. He wasn't the kind of man who acted out of spite. I called him, straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. I went around to the back door, but it was locked too. Through the kitchen window, I could see the table, clear, almost too clear. The vase I'd filled with lilies last week was gone. The family photo that used to hang by the counter wasn't there anymore. It hit me all at once. He'd been preparing, quietly, methodically, while I'd been convincing myself I was the brave one. I stood in the yard for what felt like hours, holding that broken key, replaying his words in my head. "If that's what you need, just make sure you tell the truth afterward." I thought it was permission. I realized too late. It was warning. I drove to Grace's apartment in tears, more angry than afraid. She opened the door half asleep and frowned when she saw me. "What happened?" she asked. I threw my purse on her couch and said, "He changed the locks." She blinked, confused. "You mean Mark?" I nodded, pacing. "I can't get into my own house. He actually did it, over one night, one stupid night." Grace looked nervous but tried to hide it. "Maybe he's just trying to scare you," she said. "He's too calm to do anything extreme." I laughed bitterly. "You don't get it. He's always calm. That's what makes this worse." I called him again and again, but it kept going to voicemail. I sent him a message. "We need to talk." "This is ridiculous." He didn't reply. I tried calling Helen, his mother, but she hung up after I said my name. That stung more than I wanted to admit. By noon, Grace had made coffee and was scrolling through her phone. "People are already talking," she said softly. "Someone posted that you left him for your ex. It's spreading." My chest tightened. "Who would post that?" She shrugged. "Probably someone from his office. You know how things travel." I told her to ignore it, but she looked uneasy. "Era..." She started, then stopped. "He's not playing around. I saw his Facebook before he deactivated it. He'd uploaded one post before deleting everything." I asked what it said. She hesitated, then whispered. It said, "Truth doesn't need noise." That phrase stayed in my head like a slow echo. That evening, I went to my parents' house. My father wouldn't even look at me. My mother tried to sound neutral, asking if what she'd heard was true. I said it wasn't cheating, that Mark had agreed to it. My father muttered, "No decent man agrees to that." I told him he didn't understand modern relationships. He said, "I understand consequences." I stormed out before they could say more. Later that night, I called Ryan, half out of guilt, half out of desperation. He sounded surprised to hear from me. "You told me it was fine," he said. "You said your husband was okay with it." I said, "He changed the locks, Ryan. He's gone insane." Ryan was quiet for a long moment before saying, "Maybe you shouldn't call me again. I don't want to be involved." Then he hung up. I stared at the phone, humiliated. Even he was running from me. Grace tried to comfort me, but her tone had changed. "Maybe you should just apologize," she said gently. "You can fix this." I shook my head. Apologize for what? Being honest? Everyone's acting like I'm a monster because I didn't lie. Still, that night, lying on Grace's couch, I felt something crack. His silence wasn't panic, it was control. He wasn't shouting, wasn't begging, wasn't even angry. He'd just erased me. The next morning, an envelope slid under Grace's door. My name was written in neat, deliberate handwriting. I opened it, expecting a note, maybe a list of demands. Instead, it was a formal document, notice of intent to separate pending legal review. There was no signature, no explanation, just a lawyer's contact information at the bottom. Grace read it over my shoulder and whispered, "He already talked to a lawyer." I said, "He's bluffing. He wouldn't actually go through with this." She didn't answer. By afternoon, more messages were coming in, some from friends, some from co-workers. Everyone wanted to know if it was true, if I had really said yes to my ex. Some of the messages were cruel. A few tried to sound sympathetic, saying things like, "You were too honest for him. It didn't help." I could feel the story slipping away from me, reshaped by other people's mouths. That evening, I drove back to the house. The lights were off, curtains drawn. I rang the doorbell, then knocked hard enough for my hand to hurt. After a minute, I saw a shadow move behind the glass. Then his voice, calm and distant. "You don't live here anymore, Celine." "Mark, please." He cut me off. "You wanted closure. This is it." The door stayed closed. I stood there until the porch light flicked off, leaving me in the dark. When I got back to Grace's, she was waiting with her laptop open. "You need to see this," she said. She'd found a post on a local community page, a screenshot of my message to Ryan about one last night, somehow leaked. The comments were brutal. Words like cheater, narcissist, attention seeker filled the screen. I felt dizzy. "He's behind this," I said. "He's trying to destroy me." Grace shook her head slowly. "No, Celine, he doesn't have to. You already did." I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. Quiet, final. "You wanted closure. This is it." And for the first time, I started to understand he wasn't bluffing. He was building something bigger than anger, something precise, something permanent. The following days blurred together. Grace kept saying I needed to reach out, fix things before they became permanent, but I didn't even know how to start. Every time I called, Mark's number went straight to voicemail. The house remained dark every night when I drove past, like it had been emptied of life. I started to wonder if he'd taken Emily with him, though I didn't want to admit out loud that I didn't know where my own daughter was. I finally got an email from him. Not a personal message, but a formal notice from his lawyer. It said I could contact him only through legal channels and that all communication about Emily or shared assets would be handled professionally and in writing. My name looked cold on the page, printed under the words Respondent Party. I tried to call Helen, but she didn't answer either. She sent a short text instead. "This is what happens when you humiliate someone who loves you." I threw the phone across the couch. At first, I told myself Mark would calm down once he realized he'd gone too far. But then the real consequences began. The school called to tell me Emily had been picked up early twice that week by her father. When I went to the office to ask about it, the receptionist told me, "Mr. Ward said there's a temporary order. You're not allowed to take her off school grounds until this is settled." My ears rang. "What order?" I asked. She just handed me a folded document. It was real. His lawyer had already filed for temporary custody, citing emotional instability and public misconduct. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, that it was just one mistake, one night, not abuse or neglect. But words like that don't sound convincing once you've already made yourself the villain in public. I ran to Grace's place and threw the papers down on the table. "He's taking Emily," I said. "He can't do this." Grace read the forms quietly, her face pale. "Celine, this isn't temporary anger anymore," she said. "He's serious." I shook my head. "No, he's doing this to punish me. He wants me to suffer." But when I said it out loud, it didn't sound as strong as it had in my head. That evening, I emailed his lawyer myself, insisting I needed to see my daughter. The reply came within an hour. It said that until the next hearing, all visitation was suspended pending psychological evaluation and review of my public conduct. It even included links, screenshots of my texts, a few of Grace's old posts quoting me, things I had thought were harmless at the time. I read them again now, and they looked cruel, careless. Grace sat beside me in silence. "You need to apologize," she said softly. "Not to get him back, but for Emily's sake." I laughed bitterly. "Apologize for what? For being human?" She didn't answer. By the next morning, the story had spread beyond our town. Someone had shared screenshots of my old posts on a gossip page with over 10,000 followers. The headline read, "Woman brags about closure night with ex. Husband responds with custody claim." There were hundreds of comments, mostly calling me disgusting or stupid. I couldn't even look at them all. That night, I finally received another message from Mark, but it wasn't to me. It was a copied email to both lawyers, outlining his new request: asset division and removal of my name from the mortgage for stability purposes. The last line said, "I am not pursuing punishment, only peace." I stared at those words until they blurred. I wanted to believe they were written out of exhaustion, not intent. But deep down, I knew this was his way of ending things, the only way he knew how. Quietly, legally, without a single raised voice. When I tried to visit the house again, no one answered. The curtains were drawn, the garden trimmed, everything too neat. My car's headlights caught the reflection of something new. A metal sign near the gate that read, "Private property, no trespassing." It wasn't there before. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass of the car window and whispered, "You win." But even saying that didn't bring relief, because the truth was he hadn't shouted, hadn't cursed, hadn't taken revenge in the way I expected. He'd simply made it impossible for me to exist in his world. When I drove back to Grace's that night, she didn't say anything. She just handed me her phone and showed me another post that was circulating. Someone had found the wedding photo I'd left on my old social profile. Underneath, they'd written, "He let her go," and she finally realized what she lost. I didn't cry. I just stared at it until my reflection in the screen looked like someone I didn't know. For the first time, I wondered if this was what Mark had meant by truth. Maybe silence wasn't cruelty. Maybe it was the cleanest kind of revenge. The following week felt like living inside a slow storm that refused to end. Every morning I woke up in Grace's apartment, half hoping for a message from Mark, something that sounded like an opening. There was never anything, just new notifications from strangers who now knew my name, my story, and my mistakes. My photo had been shared again, this time attached to an article about modern infidelity. I'd gone viral for all the wrong reasons. Grace started avoiding eye contact when she brought me coffee. She'd muted her own social media after people began tagging her too. You should lay low, she said gently. This will die down. But her tone said she didn't believe it. Neither did I. On Tuesday, a courier arrived with a thick brown envelope. I thought maybe it was another warning, another piece of paper meant to intimidate me. But this time it was official. Notice of formal separation proceedings. The letter listed a court date, a mediator's name, and the phrase request for full custody. I could barely read the rest through my shaking. I called Mark immediately. To my surprise, he answered. His voice was calm, steady, distant. I told you to go through the lawyer, he said. I ignored that. Mark, please, I don't want to fight. Can we talk? Just us? There's nothing left to talk about, he said. It was one night, I pleaded. You said I could. He was silent for a moment, then said, I said you should tell the truth. You still haven't. My voice cracked. I told you everything. He said, no, you told me the version that made you feel brave. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I sank to the floor, shaking. Grace tried to hug me, but I pushed her away. He's destroying me, I whispered. He's turning everyone against me. She said quietly, He's not turning them, Celine. He's just not stopping them. The next day, I went to the law office listed on the papers. The mediator, a woman with calm eyes, spoke gently but firmly. Mr. Ward has requested a clean separation, she said. He's offered you the car, a small financial settlement, and visitation rights pending evaluation. Evaluation, I repeated, like I'm some kind of danger. She didn't answer directly. She just slid a stack of printouts toward me, screenshots, posts, comments. My words, my photos, every sentence where I'd defended what I did as freedom. It looked horrifying when all laid out together. Mr. Ward's team claims this public behavior demonstrates emotional instability, she said. Do you have anything to refute that? I stared at the papers. What could I say? That it was just bad timing? That the world had misunderstood me? I managed a quiet, He's not the man you think he is. He's manipulative. She looked at me calmly. Then why does he sound so measured? I didn't answer. After the meeting, I sat in my car for nearly an hour, gripping the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The tears had turned into something else, a slow-burning realization that I wasn't being punished by accident. He had planned this from the moment I said yes to Ryan. That evening, I drove to his mother's house. Helen opened the door only halfway. She looked at me with that same quiet disapproval I'd always hated. I need to see Emily, I said. Helen shook her head. You can't, not until the court says so. I'm her mother, I said, my voice breaking. Helen's tone softened only slightly. You were also Mark's wife. You forgot what that meant when you made a show of leaving him for another man. It wasn't like that, I whispered. It was exactly like that, she said. You just thought you'd get away with it because he's kind. Then she closed the door. Driving back through the dark, I realized how empty everything had become. Grace's apartment didn't feel like home. My real house wasn't mine anymore. My job had quietly paused my freelance contract, saying the publicity was distracting. Even Ryan hadn't replied to my last message. By Friday, I received another email, this time from my lawyer. It contained the official date for mediation and one final line. Mr. Ward will be requesting evidence of contrition or corrective behavior. Absence of such may affect final judgment. I didn't even understand half of it, but the words final judgment stuck in my throat. That night, I sat by Grace's window, looking out at the streetlights. Somewhere across town, Mark was probably tucking Emily into bed, calm as ever, with no trace of me left in that house. I thought about calling him again, saying something, anything. But every time I tried, I remembered his voice. You told me the version that made you feel brave. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. For the first time, I started to wonder if he'd been planning this from the beginning. Not out of rage, but precision. Not revenge, but release. The silence between us wasn't absence anymore. It was control, and I was finally starting to feel what it meant to lose to someone who never even raised his voice. The day of mediation felt like stepping into a story I didn't recognize. Everything was too calm, too quiet. Grace came with me for support, though I could tell she regretted it halfway there. The law office was sleek and cold, the kind of place where emotions were treated like messes to be cleaned up. Mark was already seated at the long wooden table when we walked in, his hands folded neatly, a small stack of papers in front of him. He didn't look angry or bitter, just done. I sat down across from him, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "You look well," I said softly. He didn't respond. His lawyer began by reading through the terms: separation of property, full custody pending review, shared finances frozen until assessment. Each word felt heavier than the last. When it was my turn to speak, I tried to sound reasonable. "This is all unnecessary," I said. "We can fix this privately. We don't need to involve the law." Mark's lawyer replied without looking at me. "Given the public nature of your actions, Mrs. Ward, privacy is no longer an option." I turned to Mark. "You're really going through with this?" He met my eyes for the first time in weeks. "You already went through with it," he said simply. My throat tightened. "It wasn't cheating. You agreed." "I agreed to trust you," he said. "You turned that into permission." For a moment, nobody spoke. The mediator cleared her throat and moved on, explaining the financial clauses, how my name would be removed from the mortgage, how custody would remain with Mark until further notice. Grace shifted uncomfortably beside me. I could feel her regret radiating across the table. When the mediator mentioned the psychological evaluation, I snapped. "This is ridiculous. I'm not unstable. I'm human. People make mistakes." Mark didn't raise his voice. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice and called it honesty." The silence that followed was suffocating. His lawyer slid a folder toward me. Inside were printed screenshots of my posts, comments from friends, and even a transcript of a podcast episode where someone had discussed my story. At the bottom of the stack was a photo, me and Ryan leaving the cafe, my head tilted toward him, his hand on my back. It looked worse than it was. It looked like proof. I whispered, "You hired someone to follow me." Mark shook his head. "I didn't have to. You did everything in public." Grace touched my arm. "Celine," she murmured, "you should stop talking." But I couldn't. "You think this makes you noble," I said, "dragging me through court, taking Emily away from me." Mark looked at me calmly. "I'm not taking her away. I'm keeping her safe from the person who turned her family into a headline." That hit harder than I expected. My voice faltered. "I didn't mean for any of that to happen." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm not angry anymore." It was the way he said it, steady, final, that broke me. Anger I could have handled. Indifference was unbearable. The mediator asked if we wanted to take a short break. I said yes, mostly to breathe. In the hallway, Grace pulled me aside. "He's not bluffing," she whispered. "You need to accept the terms before it gets worse." I shook my head. "If I sign, I lose everything." She said quietly, "You already have." When we returned, Mark was standing by the window, his back to me. His lawyer asked if he wanted to add anything before the session ended. Mark turned, his expression calm but sharp. "Only this," he said. "I've spent years being the quiet one. She always said she wanted honesty. Now she has it in writing." The mediator nodded and collected the papers. "We'll finalize the recommendations this week," she said. As we stood to leave, Mark walked past me without a glance. For a moment, I wanted to reach out, to grab his sleeve, to say something, anything, to make him pause. But he didn't. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. Grace lit a cigarette even though she didn't smoke. "He won," she said quietly. I wanted to argue, but the truth was, sitting like a stone in my chest. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't sought revenge. He'd simply turned my own words into evidence, my own pride into a weapon. When we got home, I checked my email. There was already a message from my lawyer titled Settlement Confirmation. Attached was a single page. Mr. Ward retains full custody. Mrs. Ward's visitation to be determined upon court approval. At the bottom was one short note written in Mark's handwriting, scanned into the file. You said you wanted one last night. Now you can have all the nights you want. I closed the laptop slowly. Grace asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, but inside I could feel something hollow taking shape, a quiet understanding that he'd destroyed me the same way I'd destroyed him, publicly but politely, and there was nothing left to say. The court date came 2 weeks later. By then, the noise around me had faded into something dull and constant, like a hum I couldn't turn off. I'd stopped checking my phone, stopped reading the comments. Even Grace had grown quiet, careful with her words, as if she didn't want to catch whatever had infected my life. She came with me that morning anyway, sitting beside me in silence while I stared out the window. Mark was already there when we arrived. He looked exactly as I remembered, neat, composed, the same soft expression that once made me feel safe. Except now it wasn't warmth I saw in him, it was clarity. He didn't need anger anymore. He had the law. The courtroom was cold, sterile. The judge read through the file without emotion. The words blurred: irretrievable breakdown, emotional misconduct, reputational harm. I heard them but didn't feel them until the judge said, "Custody of the minor, Emily Ward, will remain with the father. The mother may request supervised visitation following psychological evaluation." My chest tightened. I tried to speak, but my lawyer touched my arm and shook his head. When the hearing ended, I turned toward Mark. He didn't look at me. He was speaking quietly with his lawyer, his posture calm, his tone polite. When he finally stood, he nodded once in my direction, not as a husband, not even as an enemy. Just acknowledgement. Then he walked out. I followed him into the hall, ignoring the looks from the others. "Mark, please," I called. He stopped but didn't turn around. "I never wanted this," I said. "You're overreacting." He turned slowly. "You said yes," he said quietly. "You made your choice. I'm just making mine." I wanted to say something cruel, something to hurt him the way he'd hurt me, but my voice wouldn't come. He walked away without waiting for a reply. When we got outside, reporters were waiting. I kept my head down while cameras flashed. Grace pushed through the crowd, whispering for me to keep walking. Someone shouted a question about the one last night, and I almost turned around to answer. But what was left to say? I'd already given them every word they needed. Back at Grace's, I sat on the couch in silence while she made tea. She handed me a cup and said softly, "You have to let this go." I laughed without humor. "He took everything, Grace. The house, Emily, my name." She sighed. "He took his life back." Her words hit harder than she meant them to. I looked down at my hands, shaking slightly. The ring mark on my finger had faded. That evening, another envelope arrived by courier. I almost didn't open it, assuming it was another legal notice. But inside was a single page, folded once. At the top, Mark's handwriting. For record keeping. It was a copy of our marriage certificate, stamped dissolved. Underneath, he had written one line in pen. "You said you wanted closure." I agreed. I sat there for a long time, staring at it. Grace tried to take it from me, but I held on. "He's mocking me," I said finally. "No," she said. "He's done talking." When she went to bed, I stayed in the dark living room, reading the document again and again. The words felt unreal, too final, too quiet. I thought about how it all began, how proud I'd been to call myself honest. I had believed that honesty gave me power, that confession made me untouchable. I never understood that truth could also destroy. Outside, the street was empty. The world kept moving like nothing had happened. I wondered if Mark was putting Emily to bed, if she was asking why I wasn't there. I hoped he lied kindly. I folded the paper back into the envelope and placed it on the table. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I thought of the night Ryan had asked for one last time, and how certain I'd been that I could handle the consequences. Now, every moment after that felt like falling downstairs in slow motion, every choice another step I couldn't take back. When I finally went to bed, I didn't cry. There was no point. The story was finished, and for once, I wasn't the one telling it. The world had written its ending for me. And somewhere across town, in the quiet house that used to be mine, I imagine Mark locking the door. One last time. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.